If you're coming from a position as you are of wanting to create something truly special, you got to protect that because it's going to get diluted and twisted in weird ways of compromise that it's not solid enough to withstand the compromise. You got to be this like headstrong freak about it just for a little bit.
Andre, welcome to Kristina's podcast. I'm so happy to see you today.
Same here. Super excited. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Andre Gharakhanian is the founder and partner of Silicon Legal Strategy, probably the only boutique law firm that made it to the top league, the top law firm in Silicon Valley for startups and venture funds. Am I right?
Thank you. Yeah, I think so.
Andre, on a personal note, has been my inspiration and unintentionally a mentor for actually many years. When I was working at a small boutique law firm in New York, we were fund formation counsel for AngelList. I knew that I want to do something big. I didn't know how to do it. And you and your associate gave me advice to go and work at a big law firm before I venture out. And I just did that. I went to Cooley and your advice worked out. I was even thinking like switching to you at some point. And then I got super busy and then the rest is history.
Yeah.
But because you have that moment, you have the story and the path of doing something great outside of big law, that's an example for me that it's possible to create your own path. And, we probably social animals, we want to see that something is possible. And when there is a new Olympic record, you're like, okay, now we're jumping that high. So that is actually humanly possible. And that's how the new generation, they're doing something bigger because the previous generation allowed us, gave us permission. I believe that there are no limits, but there should be people coming and doing something that has not been done before. That's how we progress as a society.
Yeah, no, it certainly makes everything that I've done seem even more profound. Thank you. I got to put you on the PR team. I'm really glad to have served as that kind of inspiration. Like to me, that is really in many ways the most important thing professionally to me. I'll tell people a lot that if you are trying to be a startup lawyer simply to make a lot of money, you're not smart. You are chopping a tree down with a hammer instead of an axe. I have neighbors who are in private equity and hedge funds and can buy me. I make a great living. Everything's great. But to me, it's really about legacy and being able to help people be better, to be a mentor to people, to be able to look back on my career and say that, multiple people have become better professionally and personally because of me. Like it's so incredibly important to me to fulfill that role because it's empty without that. To me, the sort of the professional accolades and financial success they're important. They're table stakes. They really matter, but they're not totally fulfilling all the way. It's really about people and about truly affecting people. And when I've had the good fortune and right place, right time, and just been able to have opportunity, meet preparation that's enabled me to make a really tremendous impact in a lot of people's lives. And that's the thing that's the legacy. That's what I'm excited about. That's the look at my son in his eyes and know that I'm the best dad I can be. That's it. So thank you.
Thank you. Let me challenge you here. Do you think you can make an impact working at a hedge fund or private equity and being a billionaire?
Oh, I totally think you can. Yeah, I think you definitely can.
So why startup law?
To me, I guess it was a couple of things, and it probably makes sense to talk a little bit maybe about the journey I had because that sort of informs it. I went to law school, not even thinking about this area. I kind of just fell into law school as an economics major. I ended up spending a summer with a firm that did testimony and trial exhibits and antitrust cases. It was a firm called NERA Economic Consulting. And, met with the antitrust lawyers and got excited about that aspect. I was like, okay, maybe I'm going to do that. Maybe I'm going to be, an antitrust lawyer. And that's why I went to law school. Got to law school, was horrible at law school. Like, had been a great student my whole life. I was a terrible law student. Was kind of discouraged. Ended up in transactional law. Ended up in Chicago at Mayer Brown, and was doing, the Fortune 100 deals and M&A and capital markets kind of things. And noticed that I wasn't necessarily dealing with a lot of kind of movers and shakers. The people that I was, dealing with were number 6 in Treasury who wanted to go home at 5 o'clock, and it wasn't really inspiring. And so I thought about, okay, what can I do here? And I was going to try to be an investment banker. Didn't go that path. Met a woman at a wedding who lived in San Francisco. I lied to her and told her I was moving to San Francisco. She's my wife. And I came out here and I joined Oryx Emerging Companies Group. And that was like immediately super interesting to me. Like working with startups and venture capitalists was like, wow, this is going to be something really cool. And you kind of catch the bug. And I love this idea of just being able to impact. I would always joke sometimes that, working with startup companies is almost like the closest thing to pro bono. Like there's this ability to really make an impact because they're so small. Everything they do is like high stakes, bet the company kind of stuff, that it's like what you do matters. You're not just pushing paper. And you're not only just the legal advisor, but you're kind of giving them data points about what's going on in the market, how other companies handle a co-founder termination, like who to talk to about, getting D&O insurance or, what's going on in real estate. Like you're really sort of called upon to be this kind of jack of all trades person. And that was just powerful to me. And so I knew I wanted to be involved in that ecosystem in some way. And then, I'd met a former colleague of my Oryx colleagues who was younger than me and started his own shop. And I was totally intrigued by that, of like, you can go do that. It's not like, leaving Mofo and going across the street to Wells Fargo and saying, dump Mofo, let me be your lawyer. But you can be the lawyer as a solo for a startup or a venture fund. And kind of the rest is history. But it's really that, again, it really tied to being able to make an impact. And I do think you can make impacts in other kinds of roles. For me, this was the one that resonated the most. And it's not just like necessarily choosing this because I can make an impact. It's saying that being a startup lawyer in and of itself is not enough. Like the doing the deals and helping with clients, like that's a huge part. But it's when I talk about being the mentor and and developing people, it's really about my employees. That is where the magic is. And to me, that's the stuff when I've been able to work with someone over many years and watch them evolve, and be a role model for them in certain ways, be an inspiration for them, and watch them to do great things. Like that's cool. Like that's a drug.
Okay, I'd love to dive into this topic because I think it's relevant also to anyone who has to manage people, and especially if you're a startup founder, you have to grow really fast. And at the end of the day, your job is being a coach if everything goes right. And also that's one of my biggest areas for growth and development. When I was leaving Cooley, my mentor, Derek Kola, he said my biggest area for growth, aka my biggest weakness is managing other people. I would love to ask you, how do you do that? What is the secret sauce?
Oh, it's the main secret ingredient is just perseverance, because it is exhausting and is emotionally draining, and it's this sort of spectrum of the highest of the high and the lowest of the low, right? So the highest of the high is when I've got an associate on a team. I'm out day drinking. The client sends a frantic email. The associate responds with an email that's precisely what I would have said. Like in that's just a drug. That's incredible, right? But then on the other end, you'll have situations where, you thought you'd been super clear on directions and someone's just not getting it. And it can be really, really frustrating. And so that's been, I think, the sort of the biggest evolution as we've grown, and it's been the area that I'm always constantly learning is managing people. And so much of it, I think, at some of the initial stages is just being very clear, being very direct with your expectations, figuring out in your mind what creates discomfort with letting go. Because a lot of times what I think with lawyers in particular, we tend to be kind of micromanagers, and it's figuring out, what's creating that nervousness in your mind with letting this person handle some matter. And it might be, hey, they're really good substantively, but I don't like the emails that they're sending. And that was one of the main things sort of in our firm is like, I would see in big law, like a charismatic partner, rainmakes the business. They delegate it downward to an associate who clearly knows the substantive law, but doesn't deliver the message and the answers in a way that reassures the client. And clients like re-asking the question, partner has to jump in. There's a lot of sort of an awkward situation and really a difficulty for the associate to grow and be viewed as the expert. And so I knew that was really important stuff to me. So I crystallized in my own mind, like these things that I care about, client service, like their ideals, they're written down. They're actually manualized, in my firm. People are trained on them. You're giving as much opportunity for people to give you feedback, and you're checking in with them. You're still monitoring. You're still coaching from the sideline. And so I think a lot of it is this sort of engagement and patience, being direct. There's a lot to it, and it evolves. It's like tending a garden, right? Like you can't like set it and forget it. Oh, we have this process, we're done, because something else is going to pop up. People's needs change and they want to be promoted in their career. And how do you respond to that? We went from like having a few people and no bands of associates to now, having 3 different bands of associates. And like, how do you give people clarity into how they're looking on the promotion track? It's just requires a lot of attention, but it's still at the end of the day, it's always worth it. Like it's what you can do with others, like, supporting you is exponential to what you can do, by yourself. It's about getting comfortable.
Yeah. And how do you hire? Because in your journey, you are the founder, you're the owner, you don't have, equity partners. So you have to hire, right? How do you find that? And when you hire for a partner, for an associate, is there a difference?
We actually don't hire lateral partners. We never have. So we have, 10 partners, again, with a little bit of a different structure with us, but it's 11 partners, at Silicon Legal. They're all homegrown. That's very important to us.
They're homegrown.
Yeah.
You've never brought a partner.
No, because we're not interested in like bolting on books of business, and the culture is paramount. And so for someone to be the standard bearer for our culture, no one could do that without having been here for some period of time. So I think one of my partners became partner in like 14 months. That's the absolute fastest it's ever happened. But that's a really important area is the hiring. Like in the beginning, like in the early days, it's like it's hard, because you're not a trusted place to go take a job. You're not a known quantity.
Yes.
And so in those early days, a little bit of luck. Like when I started out, like there was a recession. And so
which is now is the same. So my fingers are crossed.
Yeah, it helps a little bit when the market is softer. And so my first partner, Kristen Sverchek, she joined me as an associate. She became my first partner. Now she went on to be GC at Lyft, and now she's president at Lyft. She, was laid off from Gunderson, and you can really take advantage sometimes, because law firms, when they do layoffs, these aren't the smartest business people, like in terms of knowing talent. And so like, obviously Kristen was somebody with like an incredible future ahead of her. So that was like a blunder on Gunderson's part. Right. But Gaurav Mathur, who's like my longest standing partner, again, he had availability because of that, time in the economy.
Wow.
And so taking advantage, being opportunistic there. It's hard to put a lot of the process in place, and I think in the early days, it's just important to make it crystal clear as to what your firm is about, what it's going to be like working there, and then don't take shortcuts and settle, particularly in those early hires. Bring on people not just who are quality, but also who want to be there. We had, I think, in light of this is actually people often ask me about like one of the biggest mistakes or failures. In light of having some of these early rock stars like Gaurav and Kristen, kind of like not dialed back, but like took a little easy on the recruiting. Yeah, this is gonna be no problem, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, by like middle of 2014, it was a different kind of firm. It was not great. We had a partner who was like lying to the partnership and trying to sabotage things. It was not great. There wasn't like a universal belief in, our client service values and what we were trying to do. And it was this huge wake up call to move us to a much more intentional hiring process that involves components that are not necessarily about testing people, that are more about like being very honest about what we do here. Like, this is going to be a place where a senior attorney is going to say, hey, can you prep an email for my review before you send it on to the client? That bothers some lawyers, right? There's a huge emphasis on client service. It's way different. And a lot of like really prolific deal lawyers think those are like, soft Mickey Mouse skills. And so putting not just like testing that they have the skills and will be a cultural fit, but also being abundantly clear with them that this is what it is that we do, so they can self-select out if it's not interesting.
I love it. I love it. And I want to use this opportunity for self-promotion. I'm hiring
Nice.
a mid to senior level associate, emerging companies, venture capital. If you worked at the top law firms, including your firm, Andre, but I'm not trying to steal anyone from you.
Blocking your email from our servers.
Yes. Please let me know, because what I'm doing in my vision, I think I borrowed a lot of your vision for the law firm side, but I am going in, like, that's the fundamental piece, but I'm going in a little bit of different direction. I'm doubling down on software, on automation, on content. So I'm a different animal, but I think we're both aligned that if you don't have the core of your business providing value, quality, and also the service, you don't have the business.
Yeah.
So that's the fundamental. So if someone is interested, and now is the time, I think I would love to do it. And also the reason why I'm doing that, actually because of your advice, Andrew. So I was thinking about partnering, and I was thinking about giving 50% of the law firm to a senior associate from one of the top law firms. And our expectations didn't align because he wanted to be a service partner. And as the vision was growing, I realized that I can bring the business, I can do the work, and then I can hire to help me expand. So for a partner, it is important to bring in the business. Right now, I'm hiring, so I'm not expecting you to bring a business of book or do business development. I'm good with that. But for a partner, if we want to grow the pie, that was new for me. I didn't know. I thought like partner, it just, I bring the business, you do the work, and you kind of really readjusted my expectations drastically.
Yeah.
I remember after that call, I was like, wow, this guy has balls. And you also said, who cares if you agreed on that? Like, if the circumstances change, you need to adjust.
I mean, and that's why I think, going in, you're like me, you're a solo founder, and um, there's a temptation to bring on founder level people kind of early. I think certainly because we're you know even though you have a software component, we're not this kind of software
It's a service
business. It's still a service business, and so there's a temptation because what we're surrounded with in our practice to do more of that. But it's like your vision is so important, and it's evolving, that a lot of these decisions, like, they can't be made by committee in the early days. There's just this kind of a little bit of like blinders on, like just headstrong. You got to do it for a little bit. Now that certainly, like, once you've got a team even of like 5-6 people, that totally changes. And it can't be like authoritarian anymore. It has to sort of evolve. But especially right in the beginning, and I think for someone who has a real vision, like I think, a lot of sort of solos and like boutique lawyers, they don't have a vision like you do or like I did. I think they kind of just don't want to have a boss, and they kind of take a little easy, which is completely fine, and they just want to do good work on their own terms, and that's it. I think that if you're coming from a position as you are of wanting to create something truly special, you got to protect that, because it's going to get diluted and twisted in weird ways of compromise that it's not solid enough to withstand the compromise. You got to be this like headstrong freak about it just for a little bit until it kind of gets its footing.
And it's okay that my vision is not crystallized yet.
Yeah, totally.
Like, for example, I went for dinner with Naval, and he kind of like wrote the business strategy for me. And now my vision is a little bit different.
Yeah.
He said, don't hire lawyers, hire 6 software engineers and automate. He basically influenced the name that I decided to change. But that's okay, because I felt that connection to him, and I knew that my vision would be aligned with him because we have aligned values. And he has built in the system, in the ecosystem, right? Automating fund formation. That is like, that requires a lot of balls, and he has that. So my vision is being shaped by talking to you, talking to Naval, talking to other people. My mentors.
I'm huge on that, and that's actually where I think that you're going to make more progress through the advisors than you will, I think, in having a partner at this stage. That was me. I mean, two influential advisors for me was one, an employment lawyer. You probably have crossed paths with him. His name is Doug Mandel. He's sort of the premier lawyer for founders. Like if your company is getting bought for $500 million and the founders have their own personal representation, Doug Mandel he's the person. He's going to be their lawyer. I'd met him because in the early days as like a solo in San Francisco, I had talked to. We all
oh
kind of
my
knew
God,
him.
Andre!
You probably know him, right?
Doug. So we met here in Rincon Hill at a bar. I was sitting drinking wine. He was drinking wine, and I shared with him. I can't believe this is happening. And I shared with him this vision that I'm taking equity from founders, and it's both cash. At that time, I didn't know I'm gonna have a law firm. I didn't have a law firm. I was like, I'm this venture investor who is like, and lawyer and a combination. And he gave me advice. He's gonna be extremely successful. You're doing the right thing. So we exchanged now. Like I can't believe that.
He was a big. He pushed me a lot. He's like, you make this thing bigger. He's like,
he said the same thing to me. Andrew, what is happening?
Right? And then another huge sort of advisor. He was my CEO coach for 12 years. He's still kind of an advisor. A guy named Patrick Ewers. He has a shop called Mind Maven. Has driven so much about the infrastructure and processes and how we think about things. That's where you're going to get your strength from. And I think when you can, have a few years, or to the point of having like, 8 people, 10 people under your belt, with the jet fuel of those advisors around you, you're going to be in a much better spot. And then it's time to like open it up a little bit and have a more sort of participatory kind of organization in terms of the vision.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. I've been doing it intuitively. Like you and I just randomly emailed you years ago, and without any title being a mentor, I always emailed you on like important decisions, and you always respond on my important decisions. And I mentioned Derek Cola since now, like, and he sends me clients. I always important decisions. I talk to him, and you guys help with the strategic things. Then, for example, how much revenue I can be making, when I need to hire. And both of you gave the same advice, although you are different. Derek has always worked at Cooley, so he knows how to be successful. He just opened Miami office within a big system, but it's like based on stability. You're a disruptor. You cannot be successful just remain in the status quo.
Yeah.
You will be unnoticeable. So you have to be like that rebel, and that's my strategy. If I wanted to make it successful, not in like 50 years, but in 5,
Yeah.
I have to be fully myself, like unleashed.
Yeah.
And that's also the advice my venture investor mentors give me. They're like, Kristina, you have to be even more yourself, because we know
Yeah.
you.
You and I actually were talking about that in the lobby. I think authenticity is so important. And I mean, naturally, I guess I've grown up a little bit over the years. I think in the early days, would be a little more reactionary, would kind of be a little more combative. But
Me too.
it also, I still believe that, like, if everyone likes you, you're doing something wrong.
Oh.
And if you rub some people the wrong way, it's a good thing. And because it's a brand. It is what you're getting when you're like dealing with me or dealing with the Silicon Legal lawyer. There's just a way that we do things, and you might not like it. And a lot of like traditional, big law, more rigid lawyers like freak the hell out at some of the positions we'll take on things, or how we'll downplay something that they think is like a diligence disaster or whatever it is. We have an outlook, an ethos, and at the end of the day, I think that's what will win. Like, will win people over and win stronger fans, rather than just being good. Like, okay, they're great at, like, especially with what we do. Like, it's not rocket science, and so like to really sort of differentiate yourself as a startup lawyer is like, okay, I've done 4,000 venture finances. Okay, someone's probably done like 5,000. Okay, big deal. Like, what at a certain point, it doesn't matter anymore. It's more about what are you getting with working with me and my team. Like, what does that feel like? What kind of a partner are we? What's our perspective? How is it helpful? How are we strategic? How do we have a sense of humor? One of my clients today literally said, because we'll be negotiating contracts with like in-house at some large enterprise, which, a lot of great in-house lawyers, but also a lot of people who just have to justify their existence, who literally are like emotionally scarred if they can't mark something on a document. Right. And it was kind of a lazy lawyerly comment that we got across. And I made a joke to my CEO, and he was like, man, you need to like start like an anonymous Twitter account, like shit legal says, like, and that's the thing. I'll just be bold. I'll tell you, this is dumb, just because someone's in a certain position of power or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean they're right. We've got like a lot of VCs, like, are really shitty negotiators, and you can get one over on them. Like, you have to think about how to do it in the right way. But just because you're a venture capitalist, just because you have that title, doesn't mean you're somehow a negotiation expert. And I think it's that sort of honest, like, real talk kind of approach. I think it resonates with folks. It doesn't resonate with some folks, and that's okay too. And that's like, the more that you're you, I think that's, in the end, you'll have setbacks, and some people just won't like you. But at the end of the day, like, the best champions are going to come.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's going to resonate with many founders as well. I always felt I'm kind of like out of place in many places because I always speak my mind. I always have the opinion. And I don't know whether you know that about me, but I was one of the youngest government officials in Russia. So I've been in this like in politics before the war started and when I moved here. And there are always people who loved me and people who hated me, people who wanted to hire me, to cancel me. And it kind of continued.
Yeah.
And my strategy when you have to survive in those and like succeed, exactly the fans. You have to make friends with many people. So if like one says, "Oh, she's bad," like the other one would protect you. Like that's in Russia. It was like being friends with the persecutor because the prime minister changes, and you kind of have that. And honestly, I applied the same thing in corporate because in a big law firm, I would have partners who love me and who would support me, and partners like who the hell she thinks she is kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was just me. And one of the things that I, like the reasons why I knew that I'm not going to be in big law because of the content. So they had like a leadership discussion and two partners, Derek Kolla, Peter Werner, they supported me doing content, and two older partners, or even three, they said no. And while our clients, like general partner of A16Z, he was the one who was pushing me to do content. I was like, sure, I'm going to get fired if I'm going to do that. And like being yourself, it's super hard in that structure. And I think that's the founder journey, that's the hero's journey, that you might get canceled within a big structure, but if you're creating the structure on your own, your vision, you don't have that limitation, and that's your vision. I think that's what made you successful, and that's what differentiates you from those boutique law firms, as you said, who just want to make money and like work and that type of stuff. I didn't realize that. For the longest time, I was like, I'm just like, there is something wrong with me, but now I know I'm just built differently, and you validate that.
Yeah, and you have to constantly remind yourself that, like, one of the things that we started, like back in 2011, was something that we called the praise book. It's not religious, I swear. It's actually used to be actually physical, and now it's just sort of email gathering in it. But it is a collection of effusive praise emails that we get from clients, and it now is actually an internal metric. Like on our quarterly reports, we actually tabulate like last year versus this quarter, like the number of praise book emails that we got. It's actually a metric that we use. But the idea behind it is that there's so much like positive and negative feedback all the time.
Negative as well. You get negative
totally
feedback.
all the time. And or just someone's a jerk about it, or someone, a company grows, they bring in a new CFO who's only worked with Fenwick. They have a total chip on their shoulder, and they'll be hostile. Happens all the time, right?
Wow.
Knowing that, guess what? Like there are shitty clients. There are people who are wrong, and like grounding yourself to remind yourself, hey, here's what's in the praise book. Look what we're doing. We're doing right. It's okay. Oh, so this one person was disappointed, or this like investor, like got mad at us for something we didn't even do, and I think as again, it's this whole idea of not necessarily having to please everybody. Like realize where everyone's coming from, realize where their motives are. Try to learn from it. And there are times when there's nothing to learn from it except that person sucks. One of our clients had a person they had brought on. It was two co-founders, and they brought on sort of a third co-founder, but she was not like a full co-founder. But anyway, just they had just closed a round of funding, and she was hostile and difficult to work with during this round of funding. And post-funding, it turned out that they had not told us about a safe, and that like impacted numbers, and a fix needed to be made. Without the other two co-founders like copied, she emailed us and talked about it and basically implied that she had talked to the lead investor board member in our defense, letting him know that, yeah, they still like to work with us, basically implying to us that she had thrown us under the bus.
Yes.
I was like, no. We know exactly what the history here is. So I copied in the two co-founders, explained our position, and back-channeled with them too. And like, listen, this is false. 2 months later, she got fired for being dishonest, and among other things. And so the idea to me is like people will give you criticism or be harsh, try to learn from it, but also know that like it's very easy to dole out criticism. Like, big deal. Like my record stands on its own. Like I don't need to prove myself. It's done. So it's like,
no, of course, you like at the top page book for many years, but if you're
it
starting out,
no. But even when you begin to have that sort of track record and it starts to grow, like, have faith in that. Like, there will always be haters. In the early days, it doesn't happen as much anymore. But in the early days, we would be fired as counsel. Like after a new round, came in. And that was always the warning I got. It was actually funny. I think you had asked me once, like, who are some of the people that like helped me along the way? Jeremy Liu at Lightspeed. He led the round for my first SLS client to get a venture check.
Yeah.
And I was petrified when the client was like, yeah, we got a term sheet. I was like, oh shit. Because everyone at Oric was like, yeah, you know what, you're going to get fired as a solo. But he knew me and was totally comfortable. And I was company counsel, all the way through the sale of the company. But that's, that things are just happen. They're not necessarily your fault. They'll happen. And, somebody like, yeah, you can't work with this firm anymore. You need to work with Cooley or whatever it is. And there are all these opportunities for like what appear to be negative feedback that you could take personally, that you need to start taking stock of like all your victories, all of your praise book entries. Like, start taking stock of that.
I do, and I put it on the website.
Yeah. Remind yourself of these things, because it's just a journey. And that goes the same with founders as well. Like, just because, like, look at some founders that like have had trouble raising money, or like, some board fired you, and then they went and kicked ass at their next company. Like, that board that fired you is not like the end all be all of like what it takes to succeed. And so sometimes it's just not the right fit. Sometimes it's just that's not the right board for me. That's not someone who truly shares my vision. And so I'm a big believer that like, people dole out a lot of criticism, and like, you have to learn to just keep on persevering, particularly if you believe in what it is that you do. And if you're not just going through the motions, but you really believe in this, it's a lot easier to keep on punching through.
Yeah, and I think that's why you are special. You are at the top of the game, because you are the founder. Like exactly, you are exactly on hero's journey that startup founders are and investors. And you investor yourself. You also invest in startups. So I think your clients see yourself in you. And I'm guessing, and it's a question for you, I think you see yourself in them. That's why you know that everything is at stake, because that's what happens to me when I feel not motivated. I know that my advice right now, that will determine whether the company will go on actually or not. You feel that you feel totally in their shoes.
It's a level of sort of like relatability, responsibility, that that what you do has an impact, that it's really important, that I feel that my advice is more informed, that I feel that I can really be a powerful sort of multiplier in what it is that they're trying to do. And I look for that. I look for, when I'm talking to potential clients, I look for that. Like, you definitely should not be more risk averse than me. That's weird. Are you someone who's really going to persevere and push through this? Because there's a lot of like, I want to be a founder. Like in particularly like in an up market, like in 2021, a lot of people who you might call startup employees, not really startup founders, got funded. It was a bonanza. It was crazy,
Yeah.
and so, but I feel it, and I think they feel it. They relate to me. They know that I'm not just like opining from the sidelines, that I'm living these things. And I think it gives a little more credence. It lets them know that if we're saying don't do something, it's probably there's a reason. It's not just like that. We're not the no person. We're like, yeah, no, this is stupid. Don't do this. This is dangerous. Like, they know that we don't just throw things around. I think it lends a lot of credibility.
Yeah, and I've been across a deal with your partner. So I was surprised how light he was on things, but he would be very specific on certain things, and it would be very few things. So the deal went very smooth because the partner for whom I work, he was arguing every little single thing. And I was like, wow, this guy, I actually really love that approach. And I personally believe that that's the right approach for startups, except for M&As and IPOs, except for exits when you split the pie. I think the early stage, if you're fighting as lawyers, you actually put the tension in the relationship. You rack up the legal bill, but then, that founder and investor have to work together. I strive for win-win. And talking about that being rebellious, I have that feistiness in me. And so Derek Kohler's job was he would literally correct my emails, making them softer.
Yeah.
So, is that approach that you guys also?
We do, because at the end of the day, it's just our clients are generally not impressed by that. Like they don't need us to be fierce. Like that's not what they're looking for. They're just wanting to be protected, and they're wanting the deal to get done quickly and smoothly. And so it's I think. And it's not our style. There's a core belief of every person that works at our firm that there are many occasions when the right response to an incoming document is, this looks fine. Good to go. That's okay. The value add is actually in that level of judgment and discernment about this is fine. Let's get going. Let's move on this. And some lawyers just don't, and we know, I'm sure, in all the deals that we do, there's certain lawyers you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
I know what's going to happen. They're going to go totally batshit over this thing. Like, okay, let's see.
Something that is non-binding, and they will mark up the whole thing. I'm like, dude, this is not even, I'm not talking about the term sheet, but there are certain documents that are not even important.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. But it requires, actually, you have to be a really good lawyer to put your name, this looks good, because it's liability. You're not covering
No, it's like it's an Audemars, right? First you master the rules and you break them. Right?
Yeah.
You need to know exactly what it is. You need to know what you're doing, and then have that sort of perspective and confidence that is based on a lot of experience to tell you, this is fine. Let it go.
Yeah. What is your vision under you, and how did you create that? How did it emerge in you?
I would say that it's kind of evolved a lot. And in the beginning, I think it was a lot more sort of superficial.
Tell me, I'm actually really curious. What was the superficial?
Well, just I want to do this many deals, and I want to hit this revenue number and.
Oh, that's my stage right now. I want a Bentley, and I want this.
Or I need to I remember in the early days I had this really non-polished 2-page PDF, and it was how many of the clients can I list are funded? I need to have funded clients, right? And then even later, even as late as 2019, right? So in 2019, we at perfect timing in the market expanded our office. And we're still paying a lease. That's a whole other. That's a sad podcast. We expanded our office and part of that was negotiating like new bank, new bank facilities, and presenting this vision that was all based about headcount and expansion also in our LA and Denver offices and all this kind of stuff. And we looked back at something that had been created a few years before, which was something, we called the 5 pillars, which really is, at the end of the day, it's like the core values. It's like robust team member engagement, responsive infrastructure, financial stewardship, visibility, accountability, prominent ecosystem presence, client selectivity, those 5 things. And then just sort of had this moment where we were like, wait a second, this head count, like revenue, office growth, all this, how do those directly tie to those 5 pillars, as we call them? They don't. Like client selectivity. Well, if we're just growing for growth's sake, that means we have to take on clients we don't want to take on. If we're trying to onboard 10 people this month, how are we going to be doing with regard to robust team member engagement?
Yeah.
And so it shifted from those sort of more superficial to, the bullet points that we talk about now. We remind our team, every quarter. It's like, maintain us as the most friendly, engaged, talented startup practice in the world. Navigate and adapt to market changes. Rise to internal and external challenges that happen because of the first 2 things, and then be super vigilant about maintaining both culture and our practice focus. We're not representing restaurants. We're really trying to be focused early stage, venture. That's really what the vision is now, and it's fuzzy, but it's sticking to those ideals, and just continuing to do what we do in line with those ideals.
Yeah, and it means you have to say no to things.
Yes. Oh, it's a huge. It's hugely important. It's funny, actually. You're talking about Naval. One of my first clients was an intro from Naval, and early. I don't know if he'd remember this. I'm not going to say his name, but had gone through a small I think friends and family round, and working on different commercial contracts and whatever. And he was like kind of maniacally cheap. Also didn't really know how to engage with counsel. Like, you can't be like, hey, don't spend more than 5 minutes on something that's going to take 2 hours.
And I'm like, I already read your message. This is 5 minutes.
Yeah. And so there was some moment where he inadvertently copied me back. Like, he had basically said, don't spend any time on this. And I gave like a quick answer. And then he inadvertently copied me in his reply, and his other co-founders threw me under the bus for not being thorough. And I was like, yeah, fuck that. I'm out. And I first, because Naval was the connect, I emailed him, was like, listen, he's got to go. He's like, I get it, whatever. But I have, like I mentioned before, I've calmed down. I used to be a little bit more of a cowboy gunslinger about doing it, but I'm still not afraid to terminate clients. Every client needs to have the capacity to be a member of your sales force, right? That's all of our great biz dev opportunities come from referrals. And there are simply founders out there who are incapable of truly appreciating what it is that my firm does, and that's totally okay. There was a company. It's kind of like in the influencer app space. Initial CEO and founder is like a multi-time incredible, one of my mentors, incredible CEO. Company went through hard times. They brought on an interim CEO who was okay, but then the board got rid of him and brought on this guy who was super high charging, like an ex-Canva exec, super hard charging dude. And it wasn't flowing. It was like, no, this is not going to work. You're not appreciating what it is that we do. And so they were, well into 6 figures client a year. It's like, yeah, no, we're leaving. Wow. And I think knowing when you're because it's a matter of resource allocation, right? We want to be spending time with people who get it, who we think can benefit from our style and our approach. Thinking about inbounds as they're coming in, and at the early days, it's really hard, and not just early days. In tougher markets, it's hard. You all of a sudden start looking at companies that you otherwise would be like, you know, but your gut is usually right. And particularly with things around like, are they like maniacally cost sensitive? And again, like I don't get venture funding. So like this isn't like, oh, I can go out and raise from friends and family again. You know, it's really at stake. So in understanding like costs and being cost sensitive, like very few founders could lecture me on that. Like I'm actually closer to the edge. But like maniacal cost sensitivity like makes no sense. That like I think you had your like you can't go in and buy a Birkin bag for $1,500. It's
Yeah.
not going to happen.
Yeah.
So
And I will doubt your judgment if you do. Like,
yeah.
Did you Google? Like, do
Yeah.
you know how much it is?
Or like not really communicating like well, like not really realizing what lawyers can do for you. Having strange expectations around turnaround times that are even just like overly bizarre. Always trying to suss that out. We always say internally that we're interviewing prospects as much as they're interviewing us, because we want it to turn in in our business, the revenue is very spread apart. There are clients that can generate a lot, but like there aren't really whales. It's just not the way that it works in a startup practice. It's a volume business. And so there's that luxury in that, and then you can be choosy. And so those who you bring in, they've got to be those who are really going to like help take it to the next level. It doesn't mean everyone has to be like a straight up groupie, but like if you know that like this person is just going to constantly complain about the bill, that they don't really engage with the team, that you get the email on Friday afternoon forwarding the contract for review that has the email trail that shows they got it on Tuesday. Like that sort of like non-collaborative approach, it just doesn't sit well, and we try our best to suss that out, and don't always succeed. But when we don't succeed, we'll try to cut bait.
And you just amicably say we don't think it's a good fit, and you issue termination letter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and sometimes there's a little background there too, depending. Like, I mean, you're sort of taking the temperature of what's in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, because this could be on the board, could be another client. Like we have plenty of clients where one of our VC investor clients is on the board, and so we did that. There's one that we fired, like I think 2 years ago, where I've got a client on the board as well, and so I previewed with the client first. And then, just again, you want to be careful of the ecosystem and burning bridges, but yeah.
Yeah, I had that experience at the end of last year. It was a VC fund. They were just starting out, and I had a good relationship with a general partner, and still, but what they were doing, because it was hard for them to raise, they started issuing term sheets to startups, and I'm like, dude, I know you don't have money. I did one Series A priced round and they didn't close. And I'm like, I am still patient, I understand. But once they proceeded to other term sheets, and it's like throwing me like, the legal takes longer. I'm like, no. And then, it was like after 2 months, and it was a big engagement for me. It was like $17K a month. It's a lot for me. I just started. Mm-hmm. And it was just not sitting well with me. I tried talking to general partner, and we had like this heart-to-heart conversation. It seemed like he understood, but that he continued plugging me in, and I would like kind of make it look legitimate because there's a lawyer doing the things, and it was just not sitting with me. I'm like, okay, I am a founder. If someone was doing this to me and my burn rate is limited, and that client also was delaying my payments. So I felt exactly how founders felt. Their company is at stake. They're not raising money. So I like gathered all of my balls and wrote a letter. And I said, I'm terminating, and you should be removing me from all of your documents. I don't want to be associated with you. Super scary. Super scary. And I was like, am I judging? Am I what? But it felt like the right thing to do, and I knew that I would not be able to list them on the website, like all of those praises, because they have certain reputation, and even like famous venture investors in Silicon Valley, they have certain reputation. Like, I don't, no judgment, but not my cup of tea.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's the right thing. In the end, I'm sure it was the absolute right thing to do.
I was so scared because I didn't have anything lined up, but then I made like 70 grand in revenue, and then like 50, 60, like it pushed me to start finding better clients.
Yeah.
And when I work with better clients, I grow because I really want to, I want that. I want you to be successful. I know that you're going places. I want to see you succeed. Yeah, so it's important to say no. I think that's when the growth happens, when you have the vision, when you follow your intuition, your gut, and whatever is not aligned, even if you don't have like anything better aligned right now, you have to say no. And then there will be empty space where you have to believe in that emptiness, that whatever you want will come. And if you went through this test and didn't give up on the vision and your intuition, you'll get something better.
It usually does at the end of the day, because a lot of times there's energy that just gets spent on the really horrible engagement that takes it sucks away energy from the other engagements, sucks away strategic thinking time, all of that at the end of the day. And again, in an environment where there's still so much green field and so much opportunity at the end of the day, it's like, it's not worth the sacrifice. It's not worth your time and your and your sanity to just put up with it when there's such a misalignment of values.
Yeah. When clients come to you, do you charge less than Big Law or no?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So they would get some benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also my core belief that you get the most benefit as a founder, emerging fund manager, working with ex Big Law, who got that training. And
there's something about it. Generally, and I don't think it's like a totally universally true, but I do think that.
But you did tell me go to Big Law before I can hire you.
No, totally. We tend to source from the same 10 firms and all that, like, because there's like a boot camp type of training.
They got traumatized enough.
Yeah,
now.
and also like being forced to work really hard, just getting the reps of the deals. Like literally, other than, to be like arrogant, other than my firm, there's no small firm that you can go to and get the level of reps. It doesn't exist. And so it's like, doing like, naturally we have a lot of recruiters, and they'll send like inbound leads, and they'll be from like White and Case or McDermott or, Nelson Mullins or, Baker Botts. A lot of like Baker Botts for some reason, and it'll be like, like they did 4 venture financings last year. I'm like, okay, that's great, and so again, it doesn't mean that like it's an A/B scenario. There's all we have partners we have one partner who's a summer associate and has only been at Silicon Legal. We have another one who's only been at Small Law. And so that's doesn't mean it's like an impediment, but if you're like playing the odds, like typically, Big Law, and it gives you credibility. Like I know in my early days, just like I know it does with you, not just getting referrals from people, but just having the badge of saying that you were at Cooley.
I'm ex-Cooley. Yeah.
It matters.
It does. And that's what you recommend, and that I confirm it helps. Although I spent more years working in-house and at another law firm, but being ex-Cooley definitely helps. And honestly, I learned as well, not only like the badge. I think clients are lucky to have you and you're interviewing them as well. So they should make a good impression. But I guess they shouldn't. They should just be themselves. And when it's a natural fit, it's gonna be a natural fit. What is the worst like horror story when the founder or investor made a mistake and it costed millions?
I would say this. One, I would say there's a lot of like what I call like startup porn around this topic, like 3 mistakes that'll tank your startup, like these like headline grabbing blog posts, and it's funny, And I don't know how you can necessarily quantify it, but I find that a lot of the biggest legal mistakes are actually people wanting to rely on legal documents to solve interpersonal issues.
Really?
Right? So like if you and your founders aren't on the same page, like at day one, particularly like about ownership, you can't you can't contract around that. Literally had one where it was like five co-founders. That's probably too much in most cases, but 5 co-founders, like 2 of which were like not full time. And I kid you not, I'll send it to you after this podcast. The one of the co-founders sent us like it's fucking like balancing equations in chemistry. I kid you not, it is about the equity and how they were going to distribute it based on the time commitment the person made. No, you can't. Like overly complex things like that, like convoluted sales agreement provisions that never going to pan out in practicality. Contracts don't solve interpersonal issues. They provide guardrails. And so I think that's just like actually a mistake that happens a lot and probably accumulates a lot. On like a legal mistake, there was one that was interesting. There was this company, founder bootstrapped it himself for a couple years. Probably put in like effectively like loaned $750K to the company in about 2 years. 7 years later, the company had been around for a little bit. 7 years later, they transferred. I think they were another firm, and they came to Silicon Legal. Within a month, the board decided to fire the founder, and he had never papered any of the loans.
No.
They decided to play hardball. We're past the statute of limitations. So there's just a capital contribution in the board's mind, and prove it, and you can't sue us anyway because they're past statute of limitations. Founder screwed over, lost $750K.
Ooh, and lost the company and the money. What the hell?
The lesson there is at least paper it. Again, the balancing equations end of the spectrum. Don't do that. But like that, you've seen that from time to time. It's like the not papering something, and sometimes it's incremental. Sometimes hey, we hired 15 employees after Series Seed. And just never got around to doing the 409A.
Yeah,
oh shit, Series A now. Oh, you're going to pay a higher option price now. Oh, like little things that aren't, the store is not being minded is not great. Or we don't need vesting. Okay, we've known one another for 10 years. Like everything's cool. Like how many times have you seen that?
Yeah,
there's some horrible breakup, and then So I think that at least getting it written down is important. And I think that's one of the areas where you see a lot of that, a lot of those mistakes that accumulate over time.
Actually, the recent thing that happened, so the founder came to me, they used Clerky. So one of the co-founders got equity, didn't file 83B election. The other co-founder did not get equity, and they have out of Google founder agreement. I was like, founder agreement does not count.
Yeah.
The guy needs to have stock. They've been around for 2 years, raised money. And in the middle of the financing with the accelerator on safes, the investor council noticed that the co-founder doesn't have equity. So they came to me. And there was a moment where I was looking at the emails between the 409A evaluators and the founder, and I'm like, this could be end. This could be the end, because they wouldn't have the money to pay the taxes. It actually got scary, and the 409A evaluators were saying oh, this is the price, and the founder's like, no, please, I'm begging you, I'm gonna lose the company, please, no.
Okay.
And they kind of did this gymnastics, and the value is okay, where we're talking about 24 grand, not 2 million. But that was a close call, honestly. That's when I realized the legal tax. So I am building that. But I realized that founders, except for Naval, many founders, they want to actually have a lawyer to have a peace of mind versus you click, you get something, and then you screw up big time. So that's why I believe in automation, not through technology without a lawyer, but
Yeah.
lawyer in the loop, just
Yeah.
at least skimming through, because if you experienced, you see the red line, you're like, okay, like not perfect, but 80% there. And on big issues, like it should be 100%, 100% 83B, 100% stock issuance. If there is no vesting schedule, like, okay, but at least the stock should be issued, kind of those things. So yeah, and another example, my friend actually lost the company because she hired a consultant, didn't paper up IP assignment, and that consultant blackmailed her for like 500K, which she didn't have, because she's like, oh, you raised $1 million, give me 500. I'm like, this is not how it works. And she lost the company. So those examples are not that frequent, hopefully, thank God, but they happen. And I think it's really important for us to talk about those examples. And actually, that's the reason why I create content and viral content, because founders, before going to bed, they're like, oh, this sounds like me. I need to fix it before. Yeah, awesome. Okay, this was great. And like maybe the last thing to ask you, what do you want to be remembered for at the end of your life?
Oh my, hello. Yeah, I think it really kind of harkens back to that. I was talking about it, sort of like mentoring and impacting people positively. I think I want to be someone for whom dozens and dozens and dozens of people can honestly and forcefully and passionately say that their time on earth was better, professionally and or personally, because I was here.
I can honestly and passionately and forcefully say that you made a difference in my life. I don't think I would be here right now if I didn't send you that email, if I didn't ask you for advice, if I didn't receive that advice. And even now you continue inspiring. And one of the first conversations with Naval, he actually gave me you as an example, and I was like, I actually know him. And I told him that I look up to you, and he's like, as you should.
It's important to me that I matter,
Yeah.
And in that sort of way, again, I've been blessed, with like the certain kinds of accolades and like material success in a way that I'm quite comfortable with, but like
your Louis Vuitton looks really good. That's what we also have that in common.
but it's that this sort of like, when someone is trying to tell you about someone like that, I'm mentioned in that conversation, like that feels good. And that's years later, like Naval and I, like Naval was one of the most vocal advocates ever, like when I first started, but, he's kind of doing his thing and I'm doing my thing. And I don't think he and I have just chatted in a long time, and probably like 8 years, 9 years, but to know that like I still have that level of impact, or that like top of mind, that feels really good.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thank you for you being you and inspiring others to be confident and pursue your own vision. And as a lawyer, as a startup founder, that's the way you go about it. But as a lawyer, I think especially now, if someone got laid off or just not happy in big law, they don't know what can they do. I think you provide like that path. And SLS provides the alternative to big law to work for, but also striking it on your own and being confident, and you believe in yourself and your vision. And it's not perfect, but how you navigate those ups and downs, that's extremely helpful. And thank you so much.
Thank you. This was really fun.